All right, everyone. We are live here on a Saturday night. I will get the easy stuff out of the way while people trickle in here. But yes, good evening, everyone. Happy Saturday. I am the schlub on the left, Chris Baker. You can find me on X, formerly Twitter at Sabres Prospects. That handsome devil, that fine-looking young man on the right of your screen there, for those watching on YouTube, that is Matthew Fairburn, Sabres beat writer from The Athletic. You can find him on X at Matthew Fairburn. Matthew, I never plug your social media account, so there you go. I thought I'd do it once. Never again. Thought I'd do it once.
I should have an influx of followers now with that endorsement. People were just
Here
waiting
they come.
for your endorsement.
I can hear them coming. I can hear the footsteps running towards your page. At any rate, Sabres in Toronto tonight. But before we begin, if you could please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell, by the way, so you know when Matthew and I do go live. Sometimes we go early, often late, and that's usually my fault, but sometimes early. And you can find the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you could please leave a 5-star review. With that said, Sabres Toronto tonight, 8 games left on the regular season schedule for the Buffalo Sabres, 6 points back of that final wild card spot coming in tonight. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen will get his net back for the Sabres tonight. Now, I'm not hitting that the Taps MP3 that I have loaded here yet. Okay, but it's getting very, 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 very close, I think, after watching this team this week. So you and I were last together Sunday night ahead of the Sabres Flames game in Calgary. No surprise there. The Sabres won that game. This franchise just likes that red mile. They seem to do very well out in Calgary. But little bit of a bumpier ride here throughout the week. And I think let's just do a quick recap of what has happened since that Calgary game, Matthew. So good news. We saw Jack Quinn return to the lineup, came back to practice on Tuesday as a full participant and got right back into the lineup on Wednesday night. Team goes out on Wednesday and they just absolutely sharded their way to another slow start. They got in an early 5-0 deficit and a 6-2 loss to Ottawa. Luukkonen got the hook after allowing 4 goals in just under 9 minutes of action. Devin Levi came back in relief, stopped 31 of 32, and that kind of carried him into a start there on Friday. Sabres take on the Devils. Again, another slow start, trailing 2-0 after 1. But I think they were saved, bailed out by a big night from Tage Thompson. I'm sure we'll get into that. A 4-goal performance from Thompson. JJ Peterka kept his hot hand going. He's now up to 26 on the year. Can he get to 30? We should talk about that a little bit. And Levi, 28 saves to get the W there. But anyways, these slow starts, Matthew, I think that's been a problem all year. That's, to me, the lack of maybe the power play not clicking, good goaltending on the good side. But, man, the slow starts have been brutal for this team. And why are we still seeing those? Why are we still seeing slow starts from this Buffalo Sabres club, especially now when everything should be turned up to 12? They should be ready to go every night, you would think.
You would think, wouldn't you, Chris? But that's the problem. I mean, they had it fixed for what? A few weeks, maybe a month or so. They sort of slowed the issue and seemed to have it figured out. They were scoring first more often. Actually, friend of the show, I meant to send him a message back. It was before I went to the rink. Kevin Snowy. He sent me an updated stat. The Sabres record when allowing 2 or more goals in the first period this season is 7-20-1. Since January 1st, they're 5-5 in those situations. So that's 28 of the time. They've allowed 22 goals in the first period 28 times. Only 10 of those have come since January 1st. So, a lot of it was early in the season. They started to figure it out, but that's still a lot of times to have allowed 2 goals in the first. And allowing 5, that was the fastest 4 goals any team had scored in the NHL this season. And it was the Ottawa Senators, who are themselves not a great first period hockey team. So that was a pretty ugly night for this team. And I think back to something you said at the beginning of the season, preseason, one of our final episodes before the season started, and you wondered about this team's ability to handle the expectations and play all the way through a season with pressure. And since that pressure returned, right, since it looked like they had a real shot, they went on that 3-game winning streak at home. They went 2-4 in the 6 games after that. They're now 3-4 after beating the Devils last night. But again, took their foot off the gas, right? Again, slid back just when it looked like they were getting close. And that'll lead into a lot of the bigger picture conversations that we have. But slow starts. I brought this up in a column I wrote Wednesday night. It stuck out to me. I've been following the Amherst a little more closely the last few weeks because, you know, the state of the Sabres is such that you turn your attention to what's going on down there and a team that's in a playoff push. And they had a rough start against Hartford while the Sabres were out west.
10 days ago.
They were down 2-1 at the end of the first period. Seth Appert, first thing he said in the postgame, terrible start. I can read the quote exact so I don't get it wrong. We were terrible in the first. That's not acceptable. I have to do a better job. We've been a really good starting team. It's something we've taken pride in. It shows guys are practicing the right way and preparing the right way. I think that's big on coaching. Obviously, I missed something in terms of our preparation or seeing where they were at mentally to get the right mindset heading into the start of the game.
Some accountability there from the coach.
Very much so.
That's all I heard in that quote.
100%. And I do think that there's an element of that Seth Appert is coaching a group of very young players, and he's going to shield them from some of that from time to time, right? That's as a development coach and the different scope of the responsibilities in that league. But I think there is an element of that, knowing Seth, that's what he believes. And he wants to take that on himself and figure out how he can do better. It's not something we heard on Wednesday night here in Buffalo. Not something we've heard very often. But what the thought in my head was, if here's a coach who is doing it at the second highest level in the world, who believes that it's his responsibility in part to have his team ready to play when you have a day of practice before a game, all these different things, then I think it's fair to, you can't put everything on coaching. Not everything about this season is Don Granato's fault. But being able to quickly find answers to problems is the most alarming thing to me. And that was a problem, a big one. Slow starts. It took way too long to figure it out. And then it rears its head at the worst possible time. And you do it in front of your home crowd after being away for so long against a lousy Ottawa Senators team, a team that nobody in this town likes. And there's just no reason to start a game that way. So that's why that conversation is right back on the front burner this week, because after they were playing some decent hockey, they go out and show some of their worst habits. You mentioned 4 goals. That's how long it took for Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen to get pulled. Probably could have pulled him after 2 or 3. No timeout at any point in that game when you're allowing the 4 fastest goals in the league this season. So I think that was a frustrating night. They go and get it figured out a little bit on Friday night, but like you said, it's a good point here by the commenter. You know, There should have been a timeout, and you know that's a common theme. I think is holding on to that thing, holding on to the timeout, trying to save it, same with pulling the goalie, not just early in games, pulling the goalie late in games. Keeps the goalie in the net too long when they need an extra attacker. So
that's what losing a lot of games does to a coach. It causes him to hold his timeout thinking he's going to need it later in the game, when sometimes you just have to pull the chute on that bad boy when you're getting boat raced in the first 8-9 minutes of a game, you know?
That was rough. And there's been a lot of those moments. If it were one night and they're hanging out in the wild card race, it's still bad. It's still ugly, but you flush it. But how many of these have we seen? Right? How many of these, just the thing that was alarming to me was just a few days earlier, they allow 6 unanswered goals against Edmonton. So twice in a span of 3 games, you allow 6 unanswered goals and then 5 unanswered goals. Friday night, they flip the script a little bit, right? They get 5 unanswered of their own with Tage Thompson, which we'll get to, but
2 empties. Yeah.
One empty from Tage, but the natural hat trick from Tage Thompson shows that if they had that Tage Thompson a little more often, maybe it's a different season. But the coaching conversation is front and center, I think, for the rest of the season, because you can't have too many performances like that. Performances that, frankly, cost other coaches their jobs, right? In this
Took the words out of my mouth, Matthew. You did, and that's fine because we're usually on that similar wavelength. But I understand they won Friday. I can't watch any more games like that one on Wednesday. I just can't. It's tiring. And it's bad. And I've said this before. I admit it. Like when I'm the guy questioning coaching, because I hold on. I'm really bad at that. I was talking about like Jurgensen's at the deadline. Know when to say when. I'm always just like, the coach will figure it out. No, when I'm the guy getting there already, I can't. It's bad, I think. And so I'm just trying to figure out, like, what's the case for Granato right now? What is the case? They have to make the playoffs? Like, I don't know if I can build like a very salient business case for Granato to be the coach next year. And I hate saying that because I think we all agree he's a great guy, great human being. Maybe had a tough year 100%. Personally with his brother and his health, and Don's had his health, right? But it's
he is A+. Like A+ guy. I do think he's incredibly smart. I think he was a great and still is a great developer of talent to a certain point. But the question was always, first question I had when I took this job, which was about 1.5 years into his tenure, 1 full season in. The first question I had was, man, this guy has been great for this stage. When they need to win, what's that going to look like? So far, it hasn't looked great. There's been circumstances outside of his control this season. But some of the things we're talking about that have made the difference to this season, slow starts, power play, I would say, are 1 and 2. Those are 2 big coaching deals right there. Those things should be able to be fixed by decisive, experienced, steady coaching. And neither one got fixed for long enough. The penalty kill got fixed a bit this year. They've gotten a little bit better defensively, but they also got elite goaltending, like the best goaltending in the NHL for months, and are still
quantifiable. Yeah.
Still outside of the playoffs by a long shot. Last year, they got career years from 5 or 6 players and missed the playoffs because of goaltending in some ways. And yet here they are getting absolute fantastic goaltending for most of the season. And that's where you don't want to. It's why 50% of the teams make the playoffs in this league, right? Because sometimes that's all you need. To miss these opportunities year after year, I think to your point, how do you build the case? And the only thing I've come up with is that internally, you really thought next year was the year. And you sort of sold it publicly that this year was the year that you would push for the playoffs. But internally, Kevin Adams and company thought next year. And they think it would be unfair to not let Donnie see it through. That's the only case I can see. Not that I agree with it, but we're trying to build we're going back to high school debate class, right? And we're trying to build the counter argument here and poke holes in it. But it is hard to build a legitimate counter argument, I think.
I'm having a hard time with it because, and I've said it before, going back to the Seth Appert comment from that game, March 20th, that was a Hartford game, right? They played Hartford, the Amherst did.
They were only down 2-0.
But his comment was right. But his comment, I don't think it was shielding the young guys, because we've said it on the show before. NHL coaches, like, their primary job is get your guys ready to play. You're not teaching them how to score goals. A lot of times you're trying to teach them how to prevent the other team from scoring. But really, you got to get the guys together and ready to play. And that's been a chronic problem for this team all year. So unless, and I don't want to talk about the contract, right? We know he's got 2 years. No, he's got an extension. It's a 2-year extension.
And it kicks
But
in after this year.
It kicks in after this year. But I looked it up and we were talking about this. We should clarify when that extension was signed also.
Before last season.
October 2022. So
on
it
the
wasn't
eve,
after.
On the eve of the regular season opener.
Coming off how many points? They had like 70-something points.
75 points the year before.
75-point season. They give them the extension. Then they go out and they get 90, whatever it was, 91. I can't even remember.
91.
But, okay, so they made. But I think there's this thought that maybe they gave him the extension then. After that, no. It was after a 75-point season.
Right. It was after his second season. After his first full season as coach, right? Because this is his third full season. So it was after about a year and a half of being the coach. And that's the other thought that has entered my mind, which is why I bring up the point about maybe internally the thought was that they were building towards next year's team. Because otherwise, why do you give that extension then? Other than to say, okay, I believe you've shown me enough that I am willing to give you a 4-season block of time, or 5 seasons really, which is how the extension is laid out, to make this work. That is uncommon.
There's no way in hell it was about next year's team.
It's
with
uncommon,
this drought,
right?
Yeah, no. With this drought and with Kevin Adams not making the playoffs in his tenure here, and you miss it by 1 point. When you missed it by 1 point last year, it became about this year's team. Period.
Of course.
100%.
But they didn't act that way in a lot of ways.
Right. They didn't go after their Quinn replacement when they could have. Right?
They didn't spend to the cap. They didn't
spend to the yep.
They only added, a couple of defensemen. They didn't add up front. They went in with the thing that never squared logically to me was you're going into a make or break playoff year, in theory, with a rookie goalie. Right?
Well, that was part of it. That's where I was going to. They didn't insulate their goaltending room after losing the Craig Anderson element.
They said that this was the year. The window was opening. They didn't act like it. They didn't act with that level of urgency up top. And by extension, the team didn't act with that urgency out of the gate. Now, I like your point about the coach's job is to get the guys ready to play. Because a lot of people, I think, look at that particular element and think these are professional athletes, right? They should be able to get themselves ready to play. What I think people miss is how thin the margin is at the highest level, right? Because they're all competitive to an extent. You don't get to the NHL without having some competitive fire.
Right.
So do they have to be ready to play themselves? Absolutely. But we're talking about an 82-game season where some nights you're not feeling your best. And Tuesday nights on the road or even at home sometimes in this building, you're not feeling quite right. The way I put it in my column was the other day is what is the coach's job if not to formulate a game plan and motivate his players to execute it? It's not just, I think people hear some of that and they think, oh, these guys need to be kicked in the ass. They need to be fired up. Maybe they have the wrong players. My thought is more so you need to get these guys bought in and inspired to what you're trying to preach. And what you're trying to preach needs to be correct. The game plans need to be consistent. They need to be on point. That's how you start slow. Tage Thompson brought up last night, said, we're a young, immature team that sometimes if the game isn't going our way, other teams play simple until they can get to their game. And he's like, we haven't learned to do that consistently enough. That is on one guy.
Yes. It's a great segue though. Yes. Well, here's the thing. So, okay. So the coaching staff itself, so the coach, always has to have his finger on the pulse of the team. That's your point. Okay. Because good teams are self-motivated, but they're not going to do it all 82 times in a season. The coach has to know when to kind of step in and maybe assert his role a little bit more. But the game planning itself, the X's and the O's, that's the assistants a lot of times too. They're the ones putting a lot of that game plan together in consultation with the head coach, of course. He's not out golfing while the guys are working in the lab. You know what I mean? But is that how Don Granato is that the business case that he's going to change out his staff in order to be the guy, the tallest chef's hat in the kitchen next year?
It's a good point. And one thing, before I get to that, before I forget this point, because you brought up having the pulse of the team, right? And we heard a little bit of that in that Seth Appert answer. But I also have seen 2 or 3 stories this year from our Bruins writer, Fluto, about Jim Montgomery laying into the Bruins at practice at different times because they didn't compete hard enough. Now, you can't press that button 50 times in a season, but he's strategically, crushing
Torts
them at
does.
practice. Well, yeah. And he's got to, do things. He's got to attract a certain type of player to be able to.
But your point is noted though, and totally accurate, especially with this generation of player. Yeah.
And is that in this coach? I don't know, because we don't see it very much. Maybe it happens behind closed doors, and there could be some of that. The assistants, though, that's a good transition to make, because that is, you have to change something, don't you? You can't fail to meet expectations this badly and shrug your shoulders. Say, we're just learning. Nobody gets this much time. Like, we'll be talking about 13 years, but we'll be talking about 4 years with this GM. And it would be great if everybody got 5 or 6 years to figure it all out. A lot more GMs probably would figure it out. It just doesn't happen very often. Same with coaches. Coaches, Donnie's the 6th longest tenured coach in the league, and everybody above him has either won a cup or won a playoff round at some point. So swapping out the assistants does 2 things in my mind. One, makes you better, right? Not an experienced staff outside of Mike Bales at the NHL level. Christie's been only an ECHL coach before this. Matt Ellis, very little coaching experience.
A little development coaching, but yeah, Utah
runs the power play and never played it. In the league. Marty Wilford did have an NHL assistant job in Anaheim, but Mike Bales, experienced. Mike Bales is the only one that's coached in the playoffs on the bench, behind the bench. Or he's not even behind the bench. He's up in the box. So behind the bench. None of those guys.
That's where I'm at, Matthew, I think, because I think that's the business case.
100%.
I think
I think it makes you better. It makes you better because it's not just change for the sake of change. It makes you better. But number 2, gives you an option. You need an option. If 10 or 15 games into the season, you need to be that team that pulls the chute on the coach. If you're not going to do it now, you got to be ready to do it in November or December if things aren't going well. And if you're going to do it, this is what we talked about very early in the season when we first started this conversation is, before we're ready to go there, you have to know who you're going to get. Because
100%.
pulling Seth Appert up from Rochester, we both like Seth quite a bit as a coach, but it's more of the same, right?
My argument, our argument is more of the same. Yep.
He's not. He hasn't done it at this level. He hasn't been behind. Well, he did for a couple of games when Donnie was sick this year. I think he's got it in him potentially in the future, but for this particular group, I don't know that that's solving the problem that is, that you're trying to solve. So you go out and get experienced guys. I mean, look at some of the other staffs around the league. You could envision if a guy gets fired, who's going in as the interim. Right now, I almost wonder if Don Granato were to get fired today, Kevin Adams would pop behind the bench. Like, I don't know who else, unless you pull Seth Appert up, but then you're disrupt. They're not going to do it before the end of the season anyways. But point being, you need to be ready.
Adams may have been behind the bench with Lindy when they were in a playoff series. I'd have to check that. I'm not sure. But at least maybe they'd have.
Not when they were in the playoff series. I believe it was the first 2 years of the drought. He was behind.
Okay.
Okay.
I was curious about that. I was like, well, maybe they could at least have that if it came to that. But you know what it is like, and I was very uncomfortable talking because this isn't the first time that I've kind of brought this up, that I think it might be time to really think hard about it. I think it was January. It was shortly after you got back from the child being born. You had your little break, and I was very uncomfortable. I'll never be tired talking about the Sabres, but I'm getting tired talking about this team. And I think that's how I know that it's probably something that needs to really be thought of long and hard by Kevin Adams and Terry Pegula, right? Because he's the money man.
He's the one that's going to have to pay 2 years of Don Granato's salary to not coach. So Kevin Adams was on the development staff 2010, 2011. He became an assistant coach 2011, 2012, first year of the drought.
Okay. So, wow. Okay. Okay.
So that's bad timing
yeah.
on his part. And then, moved into the youth hockey role. And so I'm going to throw a couple chats up here that are
go for
on topic while I'm thinking of it. Papa Duke asking, if Carolina does not go beyond round 2, do we go after Brendamore? A couple thoughts on that. Number one, Rod Brendamore is coaching in the final year of his contract.
Yeah. It happens. It happens.
Don Granato had 2 years left on his. What was the rush? Who was?
You can't even negotiate with players when they have 2 years left on their contract.
Rod Brendamore, who might be the best coach in the NHL, one of them, top 5 coach in the NHL, has a good friendship with Kevin Adams. A few things. Should they go after him? 100%. Will they? I don't know, because Terry would need to be willing to pay him. And you need to get Rod to leave a place that he loves. And Carolina needs to want to move on in a sense. So I think it's a pipe dream, but he should be at the top of the list if he's available.
Hey, by the way, we have a lot of old school Sabre fans in the chat tonight. Papa Duke, Dave, Atlanta area, I want to say, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. He's been around a while. Dave Dietz is here. Dave Dietz, I think now down in Florida. Long time. Very smart Sabres fan. Jared's here. Jim Campbell. We got some really good people. Stephen Cantor, you still owe me that drink. We got a lot. I just wanted to give a shout out to the chatters that I've seen pop up here. We got some good smart people. Cummings, of course.
Is
we got
Medford Jared? Medford Jared? Medford, Massachusetts?
It is.
We like that.
Yep.
I was going to pull him up anyways, so I'm glad you brought him up.
What's he firing at? Yep.
He says, I'm warming up to the idea of Lindy only because this team has 2 goalies. I think the Lindy Ruff idea is a good one, because whether it's as an assistant or whether it's as a senior advisor in the front office, either way, I'm good with it, because I think, to my point about Rod Brendamore, how can you convince him to come here? Lindy Ruff is a different story. You can convince him. Some people think the game has passed Lindy by. I don't buy that. He had a great year in New Jersey last year, fantastic year, and had awful goaltending this year.
I don't put Jersey's year this year on Lindy. Yeah, and to your point.
Is he as sharp as he was a decade ago? Maybe not, but has it completely passed him by? No. He could bring value in a role. And
what did we just talk about, though, too? Get a good staff.
Absolutely. Right? Surround him. Or you make him a senior advisor, and he is that guy if you need an intern, right?
Mm-hmm.
You plug him in, and he helps you find the next guy. Maybe he's ready for that stage of his career. Yeah. And maybe it's the good karma. Maybe Terry's sitting there wondering, is this why I can't seem to get this team to the playoffs? I'm okay. I'm okay with bringing him back, because, he is I think, important to this market in a lot of ways. He cares deeply about the team, and he has the right type of experience that a lot of people in this building lack. And I think that would matter. And his voice should resonate with this group of players. Whether it would, I think is, an interesting, probably a different conversation, right? About
He
what
has
needs to happen to the roster.
relationships still in this building or in the building that
Including
you're
with
in, not in
Kevin.
this building. He has no
Right.
relationships in this building. Except I don't think he knows my dogs, but no, and Kevin, yeah. But I mean, it makes sense. I love it for the fan perspective. I think that there would be a little bit of juice that would come with it. If you looked outside of the bubble, the other name that I will not let go kicking around just because I think it might make sense for both parties is, and I'll get blasted for it, but I'll just say it anyways, Joel Quenneville. If he ever comes back, if he gets clearance from Bettman to get a job in the league, 'cause I think he does. Someone pointed that out last time I brought that up. You want to whip a team into shape, and the guy that's been there, done that, he's, I would think about it. And would Terry even care? Like, was that a move that he'd make? I bet you he would.
Who knows?
But he doesn't want to pay. It's like he might come at a discount too, Quenneville.
Well,
so he gets the salary he was making in
that's
Florida.
the piece of it that he probably never comes to Buffalo under normal circumstances.
Yeah.
But he's under abnormal circumstances at this point.
Yeah.
And that's a wild card for sure. A lot of it comes down. I think it's a good point you make about Lindy with the fans, because a lot of people will say that's not why you make hockey decisions. I understand that. And under normal circumstances, I would tend to agree. But I think that is part of the calculus with the decision on Granato and the rest of the coaches. What are you selling next year? And if you don't think that matters, just win, well, I would say it does matter, because a lot of damage has been done just this year to the fan base between all the saluting and the random things that have been said. And there's frustration. And you're lucky that it's still frustration. I mean, last night the building was loud. And I'm curious to see what it looks like tonight with Toronto in town. Like, it could be as bad as it's ever been in terms of how many Leaf fans are in here. But last night there were moments where I thought, and I tweeted it out, like, man, these people want to love this team so bad. Like, so bad. And they've recognized good hockey when they see it. They recognize good effort. And yeah, they booed the hell out of them on Wednesday night, and they deserved it, because they know bad hockey and lousy efforts when they see it too, especially the people that are left. The place is not full, right? But they know it when they see it. And so extending an olive branch by giving Lindy Ruff a role and trying to connect, it's worth it. The $3.8 million left on Don Granato's contract might be worth it. You're not talking about pulling the plug after a year and a half, 3.5 years, much longer than a lot of coaches get. So,
and Lindy had talked to Botterill, was it, when he was GM, or did he talk to Kevin? I can't remember. Lindy had talked to someone about a vacancy.
I can't remember if it was when they hired Kruger or I think it was when they hired Kruger.
I think it was when Botterill hired Ralph. Yeah, I think you're right. So there's definitely, that implies there's still interest or longing for this market. I don't know what his price tag is. That's always
still
a factor,
lives
like
here.
we just talked about. Yeah.
In the off season, like Tim Graham and I did a story last year talking to people about Lindy and his years in Buffalo, and there's not too many guys that have given more to this organization in a variety of roles. And maybe some of the tough love that he brings is warranted for this team. There's not too many roles, and I say this because I think he is still a good coach. There's not too many roles you could hire him in where I would criticize it. Head coach, president of hockey ops, senior advisor, assistant coach, and any of those is fine by me.
When he was canned by Jersey, you should be. No, I was going to say, when he was canned by Jersey, that was the initial instinct, was bring him back, bring him home, Just find him a position that's just like, adjacent to hockey operations. It doesn't have to be fully woven into the day-to-day. That's an advisory role. It's very vague. It's like Craig Anderson role. What the hell does Craig Anderson do? No one knows. He drives Devin Levi to games when he's, down the 90. But that's my initial instinct. And by the way, like, I still think that probably is the most logical move on several fronts. I only mentioned Q just as a name to put this in the periphery of this whole thing and just kind of keep it out, just on the, like, slightly on the outside, but compelling.
Well, what about this name? What about this name who would bring some of that fan, connection to the fans? Mike Pekka. Had him in your organization. Didn't have room for him behind the bench. So he leaves and goes to New York. Wanted to coach with Laviolette. Another guy who was available recently, right, up until this year, has the Rangers playing, at the top of the league. But if and when that guy's ready to be a head coach,
that's got a very Brind'Amour feel to it. Even though Brind'Amour's got the resume, Pekka doesn't have the resume. Playing style, attitude, no nonsense. It's got a very Brind'Amour feel to it. Poor man's Brind'Amour.
Familiarity with some of the personnel here, having developed some of them firsthand. I think that's another name, you know better than me the job that Jay McKee is doing in the OHL. And I'm not saying they should go for somebody that has a connection, but there are some legitimate names, legitimate candidates league-wide that, like Pekka and McKee, that are rising. Do you want to go with another first-timer? I think you want an experience.
That's my concern about Pekka. That's my concern about McKee is I want, just like we talk about, I want players that are veterans that have experience. There's prerequisites for the shopping list that I have in mind for Kevin Adams this year. Experience, playoff experience, a cup would be nice. Those are prerequisites. I have the same prerequisites for the next coach if it's not Don Granato. Pekka thing, I like the Pekka thing, Matthew, like just in terms of the attitude and like the teams that he led here in Buffalo were hardworking. I think he would coach the same way. Again, another parallel with Brind'Amour. It has a different feel. To your point about him being in Rochester and having some influence on the molding of some of the guys that are on the roster right now or in the system, that matters. It's not the same nostalgic thing as going out when they brought in Housley. Completely different. So I could see that because people are going to piss him on all the time. It's like, oh, you're bringing in another old Buffalo Sabre. Like, why do they keep doing this? Peck is a little different.
Well, and when I bring these names up, like a McKee, I'm also thinking about if you're rounding out the assistant staff, right?
Yeah.
Not talking about head coach there. I'm talking, you can get that guy maybe behind your NHL bench and, pry him away from his head coaching job.
You muted. While Matthew's getting set up, we have a little technical difficulties there with Matthew. Hopefully he doesn't lose his train of thought. I did have a couple chats to pull up randomly. Hey, real quick, I did go through and I mentioned some of the you're still off, Matthew, still can't hear you. Did mention some of the other longtime followers. I did want to call out Michael from Orange Skoldvik, Sweden. Thank you for joining the show tonight, Michael. He's a good guy. Michael came. You're back, Matthew. I'll just tell the story real quick. Michael came over with his friend David from Orange Skoldvik a couple years ago. Picked him up at their hotel, took him around town, and proceeded to take them to Kohl's. And we sat there and drank several Bloody Marys. They probably think that's normal for Americans to drink like several carafes of Bloody Marys. That's not normal, Michael. But and I think I dropped them off back at their. They were staying. I forget where they were staying, but they were pretty lubed up when I dropped them off. They probably slept for about 12 hours that night. Matthew, you were talking about coaching before you're muted, but you're back. I can hear the noise in the background, so you're good to go.
Yeah, I mostly made my point, but having some of these guys, some of these names to keep in mind as assistants. I see some of these chats, and I do understand the sentiment from Steven here, go outside the organization and outside the family. I understand that. I really do. And I think they should be doing that as well. I think about it from two standpoints, is that they do have some damage control to do with the fan base, like serious damage control. But number two is what we keep bringing up with players and brought up with Brendamore is got to convince people to get here, right? This is an undesirable place for a hockey coach, for a hockey player right now. It shouldn't be. It really shouldn't be. But people that have been here and that have seen it when it's a good place to be, they're easier to convince, right? Jay McKee knows. Michael Pekka knows. Lindy Ruff knows. So, and they're not slouches, right? We're not talking about pulling, random guys out of the woodwork who have never coached before. So it's a fine line. And I do understand the sentiment from people who would want an outside set of eyes. And it might be the healthiest possible thing they could do. But you do wonder. So here's an interesting thing. Every coach that they've hired under Pegula has never gotten another head coaching job after he's gotten fired. They've never, under Pegula, you could argue since Lindy Ruff was the coach, had that like hard ass coach.
Yeah. Would
Pegula and Kevin Adams want to go outside? Would Kevin Adams? It's the same thing we've talked about when, why aren't there a president of hockey operations? Is that type of presence threatening or intimidating? I don't know. Is an outside set of eyes, a powerful outside set of eyes, no less. Here's another random and
that's a big
topical
salaried position, by the way.
Well, that too.
President of hockey operations. Let's not
getting
forget
somebody
the
from
obvious
outside
one.
and convincing them to come here. One of these top end coaches. Right, the last time they went real big game hunting in the coaching market was probably Mike Babcock, right? And they ended up on Dan Bilesma. That's almost a decade ago now. 9 years that they made the run at Mike Babcock.
It all blends together.
Spending is not at that level at the moment. If you want to prove otherwise, by all means, I'd be happy to see it, but because the fans deserve it. That's what they were sold on, 13 plus years ago. But that's my concern in terms of trying to be realistic about who they're targeting, what they might be looking for. Some of that familiarity probably does matter just in being able to sell those people on coming to Buffalo and trying to fix this, and people who care about fixing it too. And I think those people would care more than most and have that, other people might want to come in and I don't know. If you could convince people, then certainly you should cast as wide a net as possible. Let's not forget when they hired this general manager, they did not do a search.
No, they did not.
So I'm just operating under the behavior that they've shown recently.
What do you think will happen?
My best guess is that they keep Don Granato and they make some moves with his assistants. But
we are aligned, by the way. Yep.
I am more on notice than I was after the deadline. Kevin Adams was pretty emphatic about when he said to me that he anticipates him being the coach and they're aligned and he sees the preparation. Wednesday, I thought if there's more like this, they might not have a choice. The reason why I think it's hard to predict is because the ultimate wild card is Terry Pegula, and not a lot of people know what he's thinking. He's not around a lot, or we don't see him a lot if he is around. And one change of heart from him, and that's it, right? So he has the ultimate say. Kevin Adams has the power to do what he wants, but Terry Pegula has the ultimate say. So if he changes his mind, that's why I'm always on edge. It's the first time I've been like this covering a Pegula franchise since the last coach I covered getting fired was Rex Ryan with the Bills. And that was, again, a long time ago where money was no issue and the whole thing. So I don't know. It's an interesting time, but I've gotten the sense that they're kind of gritting their teeth getting through this, and they're going to give them another shot at it. But you can't have too many more games like Wednesday and continue to justify it.
Man, yeah, I think that's where you landed is where I'm at. I kind of have a feeling, well, the business case. I think that the business case we made for him to be the coach next year is probably what they're going to do, unless something just catastrophic happens here. You know, you lose the last 8 and half of them look like that game Wednesday. You can't keep them then. You can't keep anyone then.
Yeah.
I'll argue you probably can't keep a third of the players if that happens.
Which that's another conversation here, right? Is that, and you and I behind the scenes have starting to construct our list. We're getting there, right? Of targets. We're building the board, and we have a lot of time to fill in the off season. So I don't want to spoil all of our off season content, but we're getting there. I know a lot of people ask those questions, and behind the scenes, it'll be a couple times a week. We'll send names back and forth, start to look at contracts. That's all you can do, I think, is start to chip away team by team and look, okay, is there a trade here? Is there a contract that's expiring here? What can you do? And I like some of the names so far. You know, we'll see what we can put together. We'll see what the chat, you know, they always have some good suggestions as well. So the personnel side of this is coming, but I think the main issue right now and why we've, you know, devoted most of the time here tonight to the coaching issue is because it's the easiest change to make and maybe the most impactful if you still, as a fan, believe in a chunk of this core. And I think Friday night, what Tage Thompson showed you is that maybe that's still in there, right? Maybe it's in there for some other guys too. So a coaching change can have a massive impact. And there are some big names out there.
I don't want to put you on the spot. Have you done the math? What's the math looking like? I haven't done the math for the Sabres. I've been kind of tied up with some other things this week. I mean, I know they're mathematically still alive because I know the vibe in the city would be completely different right now and in the chat if they were. But I mean, can they win all 8 and get in? They could also probably win all 8 and not get in.
They could win all 8 and not get in. Their money puck percentage is at 1.9. If they win all 8, they match their point total from last year. So do you think 91 gets in? That's the math you're looking at. The Capitals are at 81 with 10 games to play.
And you got them twice, right?
You do have them twice. They have 2 games in hand. The Wings, you're even in games played, but they have 80 points. The Islanders have 2 games in hand and have 77 points. You're even in games played with the Devils, and they have 76 points. I think to underscore the chances that they have is that last night felt like the final blow to the Devils because they lost. They're still ahead of the Sabres. So
yeah, that's wild.
It's bad math. It's not great.
Got to win those Washington games. Got to win both of those outright. Can't go to overtime. They can't get a point in those games, basically, right? Detroit picked up a point today, getting to overtime against Florida, but lost in OT. Okay. I mean, there's still, that's why I'm saying, like, I'm not playing that Taps MP3 yet, but it's on deck. I think we're getting there. Unfortunately. But we'll see what happens tonight. I always say, and you've said it too, you can only look ahead to one game at a time, and Sabres do, for whatever reason, kind of show up. They get up for those Toronto games, you know, and it's going to be packed tonight, by the way. I had lunch this week with a business associate from London, Ontario, and he said his younger son, is coming down with 7 of his friends or something like that, and it's their first Leafs game. They have to come to Buffalo for it. So I think the building's going to be absolutely rocking tonight. So, hey, at least it's going to be a fun Saturday night in Buffalo at any rate.
And maybe some people out there made some money on their tickets. Got some of their money back, which I wouldn't blame anyone for doing it.
They could put it into their Bills PSL fund.
Right.
Jeez.
I don't know how many.
Let's not go there. Let's not go there.
Yeah. I don't know how many of the chatters are far down the road in that process yet, but that could be rough.
6:52. I know the Sabres have a little bit of a delayed puck drop tonight. Is that right? 7:15 puck.
National television in 2 countries.
Oh,
International
wow.
television, I guess. That would make it.
I want to be out of here by 7 though. Okay. So, hey, just real quick, let's go through the chat. Did anyone catch the Amherst game? I did, most of it. Sabres have a ton of talent coming up the pipeline. I think that we need to just take a nice deep breath, step back. The best is yet to come. Be patient. Oh, it's true. I mean, Anton Wahlberg made his debut today, 2 shots on goal, big. Had a couple nice plays. He's a big guy, he's still 18 years old. But I mean, when you look at, to Captain Ahab's point, Kulik started to get going. Rosane, to me, looks like a guy who's going to fit out on NHL third line at some point. Victor Neuchev's having an excellent season. Ryan Johnson's down there, kind of making some mistakes, but reacting well when he makes them and learning from them. No, there's talent, man. I mean, they have they're number 1 in the Athletics prospect rankings. And I think that's for good reason. I see it every day. We saw Viljami Mariala today score 2 goals as TPS got eliminated, but he just had a breakout campaign this year, a prospect no one is talking about. So, no, they're looking good. They're looking good.
Here's a fun one.
Yeah, go for it.
Brian Cummings.
I saw this one. Yeah, Cummings. He's always
double or nothing. He's planting his flag. He thinks that Don Granato will be gone by April 19th. So I understand that sentiment because of games like Wednesday. Like I said, if more of those start to happen, you can feel the energy shifting. Whereas the pressure and the tension was a little bit off when they were playing well. You can't play like you did on Wednesday night too many times. And they've done it a lot this season. A lot. Lost to the Ducks twice, among other egregious losses that they've had.
I'm just going to say, Kevin says, be real. Sabres are toast. They've not won more than 3 in a row. I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying they're not mathematically eliminated yet. But I also just said that for the past week, I've had the Taps MP3 ready to go as the show opener. So be on the lookout for that real soon. Spoiler.
We have a few people pointing out, I don't know if I misspoke. When I was talking about the coaches, I'm saying none of them became NHL head coaches again.
Head coaches.
There are Bilesma's in the AHL. Botterill, I think, could become a general manager again. That he would be the first of the firings to, since Lindy to get another job in the same capacity.
He'll get a GM job. I believe.
But there are other guys still in the profession. So if I failed to speak clearly on that, that's my bad, and I wanted to point that out.
Nope. Good call out by the chat. We appreciate that. Good opportunity to clarify your statement. I didn't have anything else starred. I went through a couple of them, but and Mitch, of course, by the way, Mitch is here. I should throw one up because we like Mitch, our custodial engineer. Is that right, Mitch? Custodial engineer. He was here in the chat. I don't know if he bounced out already. Oh, here we go, right here. He's always good for an emoji also. Mitch of the Carney vibes, sicko Carney vibes. That was Mitch for Zach Benson. Never forget that. Great moment in Baker Fairburn hockey show history. I might get us out of here, Matthew, a little early, unless you want to throw anything up.
Yeah, I think.
Because I got to eat, dude. I am starving. I've been at this desk since about 11 this morning when the
a lot of hockey today. College hockey, playoffs in Europe. You're a busy man.
I get burned out. This is the time of year where I get burned out every year when I'm just doing prospect stuff. And busy night tonight in the playoffs as well in the CHL. Savoy will be back at it. Red Deer's playing. So yeah, it's going to be a busy night. But I'll be watching this. I like just going downstairs and shutting everything off and just watching a Sabres Leafs game. There's something special about it, going back when we were little kids, and that's what I'm hoping for tonight. And we'll see what happens. And Devin Levi did have a big game against the Leafs earlier this year, right? But I know we're going to get UPL tonight. UPL would be really nice to see him get a rebound. There was a chat from, I think it was Jared here, by the way. UPL needs to show tonight that he's next season's starter. I think that's done already, but I understand the sentiment here.
I think it's done as well
next year, by the way. Yeah.
I think it's done, but I also think in order to keep the confidence, and also let's not forget the contract, right? The dollars, could be could be shifting there. You know, if he finishes the season strong, that helps his cause. The numbers were very strong before these last two rough outings. So I think he's the starter next year. But to your point, there's going to be competition, and I think he needs to show that when Levi's up here, he can play his best. It seems like he's played his best when Levi goes down sometimes, and when he's out of sight, out of mind. And they need to figure out how to work in tandem, right?
An interesting psychodynamic. Because usually, the other goalie comes up and it pushes you to be better.
Right.
That's
but
interesting.
I brought it up about Luukkonen, his OHL GM, telling me that when it was his team, when he felt like he wasn't looking over his shoulder, it really helped him with the confidence. And I think, I don't know, I'd have to look at the numbers when Levi's up and when he's not, but it's an interesting thing to follow because I think they need to learn to work in tandem, push each other in a healthy way, and they could be really good as soon as next year for this team. The biggest bright spot so far this season is that the goaltending looks like it's figured out. The rest of it to be determined.
Teddy Usick, who big Niagara region, big Sabres fan, big Niagara Ice Dogs fan. He kind of has a little contrast to the lack of maybe guys getting into head coaching jobs once they leave Buffalo. He does find it interesting that Buffalo players traded recently add huge value to their new teams. He's talking about O'Reilly and Eichel and Montour, Reinhart, and so on. But nice little balance there. But also wanted to throw up. Teddy's been pretty active in the chat tonight. Wanted to show a little love to Teddy U. Other than that, hey, on your way out, everyone, if you could please hit that like button if you haven't already. It helps boost Matthew's ego and the algorithm.
It's true.
So I'm going to take us out. You good with that?
I'm
get your
good.
Cookie a little early. All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks as always for hopping in to the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show. 8 games left, but we will be here after the season. We, to Matthew's point earlier, we have a lot cooking here to talk about throughout the summer. We're going to go through it systematically. We'll have plenty of content for you. We hope that you all stick along with us into the off season. But like I said, we do have a little bit of runway left here. You'll see us a few times here while there are regular season games being played. For Matthew Fairburn from The Athletic, for the production crew, getting rained on right now, presently out in front of my house, I'm Chris Baker. Enjoy the game, everyone, and we'll see you again very soon.